where Romulans bearing gifts.
Hi, this is Eric.
This is Carl.
This is Sean.
Red Shirt Ike reporting for duty.
And welcome back to Romulans Bearing Gifts. I think we are finally actually here at episode 80 because you guys at home don't know, but we've been going through different episode 80s. Don't worry about it. I'm hoping this is the real one. And today we are going to jump back into the animated series. All the way back to the third episode from season 1. Of course, there's only 2 seasons. But the third episode of season 1, one of our planets is missing. In case anyone's wondering, why did this one get chosen? It really came from co-producer Caleb, who's obviously not here. I just know in general he has an intense love for the animated series, and he's just always excited for us to do another one. Even though he's not here, he'll just be excited to listen to it. So that's pretty much all I got for you as to why we're doing this episode now. I will turn to Sean first.
Okay.
Initial thoughts on this. Oh, and tell me, have you ever seen an episode of the animated series before as well?
I think I had seen clips of maybe 10 seconds of clips of it in my entire life.
When you were in daycare?
Something like that, probably. This was never on TV for me as a kid. The original series was, but not this. So I didn't have the point of reference where, it was not nostalgic for me at all. And when we did an episode of I know you always say TOS, and every time you say TOS, I have to stop and the original series. Anyway, the original series, I really liked it, and I actually went and bought it all on Blu-ray. Well, the first season on Blu-ray. I haven't finished watching it. Okay, I haven't watched a lot of it, but it was a journey for me to get to the point where I was like, you know what?
Oh, absolutely.
I'm going to watch Star Trek. It's, I'm kind of a geek, and maybe, just maybe, I'll start off with the original series and go from there. It's kind of, I was afraid I sounded like one of those people that's like, oh, I want to watch Doctor Who from the first episode with the first Doctor all the way through. I'm like, honey, you ain't going to make it, okay? Okay, hold my hand. You ain't going to make it. This one is as if you had introduced me with Strange New Worlds. What was the other one we watched? It's as though you introduced me to a new series of movies. And I was really kind of digging them. A series of movies like, say, Halloween, where like the first 3 are really solid, and then by the time that Halloween 6 rolls around, you're like, you know what? I think I may be smarter than this or more creative. I don't know what this is, but bye-bye. That's how I feel about this show, this episode.
Wow.
I'm so sorry. This was what's the movie where they put the people in the needle and
Fantastic Voyage.
There you go. Yes. I think they stole a lot from that, and I'm assuming that movie was before this show.
Yes, it was. But I think this idea, well, they stole from TOS as well. Someone on IMDb said that
it's the same franchise.
Yes, but someone on IMDb said that this animated episode was done 6 times already in the original series. I don't know if they're speaking hyperbolically. I didn't actually try to figure out which 6 those would be. But yeah, and it also reminds me of Star Trek that came after it as well.
Yeah, I remember there was an episode of The Next Generation that had something like this, a giant blob in outer space that was eating everything in its way or something like that.
Yeah, that's really the Star Trek tropey trope.
Yeah.
That I mean, that's what it really boils down to.
And I'm like, okay, I've seen this all before. They're gonna go in there and it's gonna be like they're in a body. And then, I thought that, I thought Scotty was gonna save the day, but then Spock turns around and says something wonderful, and then that saves the day in the end. Yeah, I did not care for this. This is I am so sorry to I feel like the girl from Blair Witch. I'm sorry to Caleb and Caleb's mom. That's how badly I feel that I didn't like this.
I don't think anyone's offended, but also I just thought of this right now, Sean. Did it feel like you were watching one of the missing episodes of classic Doctor Who that have been animated?
Fantastic. Yes. Yes. I am so glad you brought that up. That's exactly it. I was not a fan of the animation. Because I've been kind of critical, even though I'll fucking buy it in Blu-ray and enjoy it anyway. But after you watch this for 3 hours for Power of the Daleks, this animation gets really tiring.
That one was brutal. Power of the Daleks
Yeah.
animation. That's brutal.
And they've gotten better over the years.
Well, it's a mixed bag.
Yeah. But I hate the way the animation looked. There were other shows though. Wasn't there like fucking Johnny Quest, or am I thinking of some other show?
Yes.
There were many.
Yes, but also because this was made by one of the big studios in the 70s for animation, so it resembles other shows.
I'm going to go back for a second, though. I think that was an unfair statement to say I hate the way this animation looks, because this was animation for the time. I mean, if you look at something like the Flintstones, so that was kind of unfair. I don't like it very much in Doctor Who because that was made in 2022, and I think they've come a long way, baby, if you know what I mean. But so that was unfair. And I do like the fact that they managed to get, I think, almost all of the original actors.
I'll say more about that later for those who don't know.
So that's pretty much my thing. I mean, I don't have a lot to say about this. This is 20 minutes long. So
fair enough. And I'll just say one more thing before I turn to Ike, which is, so obviously there was 3 seasons of TOS. And it was always stated in the opening that it was a 5-year mission. So I think on the part of the creators and of fans combined, these 2 seasons of animated series are considered Star Trek canon, and they're considered the latter 2 years of the 5-year mission. But there you go. And and it was really popular in terms of ratings initially, I believe. But Ike, thoughts? I don't even know if we've discussed it before or if you have even seen the animated series before.
I'm not sure where he's going to put this, but producer Caleb and I, this year, I don't remember when it was, we did the pilot. We did the pilot to this series. We watched it. It was my first time ever watching the animated series. And before I had, kind of dismissed it as, okay, well, this is, I didn't fully understand. I was like, okay, it's just, cheap animation. And now I'm, oh boy, I'm sorry. I'm the complete opposite of Sean. This is fantastic. This is so awesome. I love this animation and I love the story. It's so simple. It's so big. That's what I like. It's just straightforward. It's even more pulpy than tosses in live action. And it's only 22 minutes. I think it actually sometimes might be superior, where it's just, you get straight out, you're getting no character development. You're just getting a story, a pulp story that you would see from comic books in the 30s. And that's it. It's they encounter this gaseous being that's Galactus from the Rise of the Silver Surfer movie, and then they either the question is the moral question of the episode is Kirk going to kill this living being? Is it a living being? Is it intelligent? Does it have a conscience? Is it aware of its surroundings? And then by the end, they find they're able to communicate. I love it. It's great. It's wonderful. As I said before, I'm not gonna repeat myself because you can listen to the episode what I said before, but this is what like Japanese animation for television really understands. What they understood the minimalism, and or at least having to be budget saving. And what do? They focus in on the faces. They animate only what's necessary with the faces, and I think the writing does especially with the performances as well. Again, as dry as you can call it, I think the performances help elevate the animation from what it basically is. And same thing with like all the background music. I know it's not everything's going like this, but I don't know. I just feel as though the way these animators were able to keep everything practical and nothing like all utilitarian. If it had to be, they relied only on the story. I think it works. There's what I think.
Ike, I have a question for you.
Yes.
How much of this is influenced maybe, and I don't know if you even watched this, of stuff that was like on Adult Swim, where they would parody animation like this? Or
That's a good question of like, am I like influenced by Aqua Teen, Hunger Force, Space Ghost, Harvey Birdman, Attorney at Law,
Aqua Teen Hunger Force,
Aqua Teen, what is the other one? Sea Labs 2021, or of course, I guess
the
he's
rock and roll one.
The rock and roll one. Oh yeah, Metalocalypse.
wow, okay, you watched way more of those than I did. All right, so you know what I'm talking about. Okay.
Vividly, I didn't have like all of Adult Swim like up here as a channel until like I don't know 2014 or something like that. Either way, the point is, yeah, I'm aware of like all those, and yeah, they're parodies first, but like I can remove myself, thankfully, from those and watch this completely straight.
Yeah, Space Ghost. That I never watched it really when it was on, but it emulates this style of 70s animation, and it's based upon some type of animated talk show that I didn't watch either in the 70s. But so Space Ghost definitely. And then what's the other one with the genius and his sons? Oh, Dr. Venture. It doesn't have this animation style, but the stories are kind of like Johnny Quest 60s stories.
When that was released on DVD, the DVD case looked exactly like an olden television game in the store. I was the only person that understood that.
But I was the two shows from Adult Swim that I was a big fan of for a few years was Aqua Teen and Venture Brothers, or Dr. Venture, whatever it's called.
Adventure Bros.
Yeah, Venture Bros. I was a big fan of that and Aqua Teen. I saw the Aqua Teen, the first movie, at the cinema. But anyway.
Nice.
Well, I'll just say, and I said this somewhere before, maybe it was on Novice Elitis, but I think of my introduction to the animated series, not the animated series itself per se, but I know us Gen Xers, we all remember when we were kids, they had like the storybooks for Star Wars, etc., popular movies, Raiders of the Lost Ark, the little square storybooks that had the small little album in the back, and then you would listen to it and turn the page. Yes, I get it. Those existed, obviously. But I had, along with those, I had this full-size LP, 33 RPMs, 33 and a third RPMs, that released in the late 70s or early 80s. They released around 3 of them or something that were Star Trek, and each side of the LP had like a full audio story. It wasn't a read along, it was just an audio story, and it was like Big Finish, like all the audio production values, sound effects, and like that album was amazing because it was such a step up from those little storybook albums that we had. And it was very much like, I believe, the animated series, especially because one of the episodes on my LP had like that cat character on the bridge. And that's like the biggest thing I remember because I haven't heard that LP since the 80s. But I think it's still in my parents' house, the LP. Anyway, and then actually seeing the animated series, I went to a Star Trek. What was that company called? Creation? Is that what it was called, Carl?
Creation conventions, yes.
Yeah, Creation Convention. I went to one of those in 92, 93, and they showed the first episode. It may have been actually projected on 8mm. Don't remember. And I was so excited because I had heard of this animated series, had never had a way to see it, and they showed the first episode, and I was like, okay. Like, I don't even know. Like, I probably had a similar reaction. Not well, in the vein of Sean. I was just kind of like, okay. I'm not gonna say I hated it, but I was underwhelmed. But hey, it was 92, 93, whatever. We've done one or two before on this podcast of the animated series, and the only reason I haven't watched them all is because I wanted to save them for whenever they would come up for discussion. And there's obviously not that many in total. So here we are. And yeah, first thing I thought as well was Fantastic Voyage, a movie I loved as a kid. And aside from that, while it is a very common Star Trek trope in general, the connection that kind of bothered me was that, and Gene Roddenberry didn't write this story according to, the credits, but I still think he had a hand in it, even if he wasn't the primary writer, because he's obsessed with variations of this story in Star Trek. And I think he's a big part of the reason why we've seen so many stories that are even like very similar to this one. And the reason I say that is because this time, well, it's my first time watching this one. Watching this, I couldn't help but think about the motion picture and Voyager in particular, and especially Spock and what goes on, because that story broadly has been recycled by Roddenberry multiple times. There's shades of it in Encounter and Farpoint. There's shades of it in the other episode we were supposed to do today. And so that's all I could think about watching it now. Got some more interesting facts, but I'll share them later. Carl?
Well, I mean, as usual, I'm kind of splitting the difference between everybody. So we take it back simply. I was there for the original version of these animated series and this animation style.
Sick.
I wasn't a fan of it then. I don't mean the series. I mean animation style specifically. Even during the 70s, there were better animation styles out. It was like this was a particular flavor of it that felt a little too simple. It felt a little, budgeted. And so I remember, animation of this style in that era going, I can tell they're saving money here. I could tell they're saving. The only thing that differentiates this from the really bad of the 60s and 70s is there was no hair moving with the cell. When they would slide the cell across the screen, and then the piece of hair trapped under the cell would be moving on the screen too. They were a step above that, but the animation style at that time, and even when I go back to look back at it, I was not a fan of the animation style, which is what kept me away from Star Trek's animated series for such a long time. I remember that era. I remember the animation style. I was not a big fan. But despite that, when you sit down and you watch the episode, this one and other Trek animated series, what's really remarkable is how true it was to the ideas of what Star Trek was about, whether it was the original series or the movies. You can feel a very strong, consistent band between between the original series and the movies and what you see in the animated series. So the stories feel seamless. And you guys kind of picking up on it. Yes, there's pieces of it, but think about it. You're going forwards and backwards in time when you're talking about these things are things that you've seen in Trek before. The continuation of the original series. This makes sense. This was before Voyager and before the movies. So the aspects of things that they were touching on in the animated series, and particularly in this episode, were things that Gene Roddenberry kind of thought he'd never get to do. So, when you see him rehashing these things, we didn't know there'd be a next gen. We didn't know that the movie was going to get made, and he was desperate to put these ideas out that he felt he didn't get a chance to flesh out in the original series. So you feel it. You guys are right. We've seen this story a bunch of times, but he's been trying to perfect it, and he's come back to refine it. At the time, he just had the stories trapped in him and was trying to get them out and get these ideas out. And apparently it worked, right? We eventually got the TV series. We eventually got the movie because he was able to keep people interested in what the ideas of Star Trek were all about. And it was preserved in the animated series. So with this episode specifically, I'm with you all. If I was thinking Doomsday Machine. It's basically he's inside Doomsday Machine finally. We kind of wondered what that might be like. This is before Voyager, but you're absolutely correct. It is Voyager, the gaseous, nebulous thing out there with the potential to destroy planets wandering around. Spock's mind melding is, again, if you look at it in that context and in that order of when the series were released, movies were released, this feels like a continuation of the original series, and it doesn't violate really any of the characters, any of the ideas of Trek. It felt like a strong story to me. Yes, it felt like Fantastic Voyage. Yes, it felt like a revisit of the Doomsday Machine to me, just from the inside. But the moral dilemmas were real. The problem solving was practical and interesting. I'm going to take a swipe. I will simply say that I found the problem solving and engineering problem defined in this episode superior to what you've seen in some modern incarnations of Star Trek.
That's another good point.
So, that ain't, so say, given it 40 years, not too shabby, right? The challenge in the technical problem they were trying to solve and how they went about solving it, they had engineering as an action point in it. Not bad, right? So, all of those things, I felt that it was a strong episode. Yeah, I know I felt like we've seen pieces of it before, but for it to have been an animated series and my fear that they had dumbed things down for children, this is a good, strong episode, and it matches nicely with the things we've seen.
Wow. Yeah, wow. Two really great points by Carl I hadn't really considered. I guess in the context of if I had somehow seen this in 1973, I would probably, yes, be much more engaged with the story, since this, as you said, preceded other things to come. Yes. So, yeah, I should, adjust accordingly for that. Also, you made me think of another, you made such a great point about Gene Roddenberry having these stories trapped inside and trying to work them out and not ever knowing if he'd get the real opportunity, in live action or whatnot. Reminded me so much of something that dawned on me a few years ago when I started to dive a little bit into the deeper catalog of Alfred Hitchcock, because most people have seen most of his famous movies, but when you go into his lesser known movies, I started to notice real quick that his idea for like Psycho or The Birds and some of his more like detective stories, when you watch his movies that few people have seen, especially like from the 30s and 40s, you'll see he's constantly retelling the story that he had like in the 30s, and he makes another film on that subject, another film. And if you watch through his timeline, because he has so many films, you'll see like the early versions of Psycho in some movie he did in the 30s. But it's this very basic, not fully formed. And as you progress through his filmography, you'll see he's starting to hone it in, and then finally he gets to the classic you've heard of. But it's like the film he's been making over and over.
I think there was a movie he made called Murder where it was knife, 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 knife. This girl had stabbed a guy with a knife after he tried to assault her. So then she goes and eats dinner with her family, and she keeps looking at the knife, and somebody says, "Pass the knife," and knife, 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 and the word is on the screen. Yeah. Okay. I can.
Yeah, so yeah. That's I never really thought about that because it's held me back with a lot of Star Trek episodes in TNG elsewhere during that came out during Roddenberry's life, where I was like, again with this, again. But now that Carl said that, it doesn't nearly bother me as much because I've completely accepted it with Hitchcock and his works. So I mean, yeah, great point. Anybody else want to jump in? I have more facts on this on the episode, but anyone else want to jump in?
I guess didn't Cecil B. DeMille remake the Ten Commandments?
You mean after the Bible?
That too, but didn't he like do a version of it in like the silent film era, and then in whatever?
I know there was a version of that and many other famous movies in the silent era. I didn't know it was the same director. You could be right, but because a lot of classic movies from the 50s, 60s, etc. were already on their third go. You know, many titles in classic Hollywood. Now that I think about it, if I'm okay with Hitchcock doing it, I can't really be so critical of Gene Roddenberry anymore. And I have been stuck on this point as long as I've been podcasting. And I actually think I may turn over a new leaf on this.
Oh, those are the angels singing, "Oh, he's turning over a new leaf."
Thank you. I'm growing.
You've been saved.
Because I thought for sure Roddenberry had a hand in writing this, and I still think he did, I had to go see who the writer was. And lo and behold, it wasn't Roddenberry. It was actually a man by the name of Mark Daniels, M-A-R-C, born 1912, passed in 89. But he's a very interesting fellow. As far as I know, this is the only television writing he ever did because he was more of a director. He is notable for having directed the most episodes of TOS, which is, I believe, 15. And not only that, but was the director of the first 38 episodes of I Love Lucy. And I forget if the television series started in 53 or 55, but I don't know if you guys have ever watched those. I have.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like a whole different show because the house is different. Lucy spends a lot of time at the back door of their house that leads into their backyard. And what are those doors called? The ones that open halfway?
Porch doors, pneumatic with a pneumatic thing on it.
No, like when you went to like gym and you would check something out and they open the top half of the door, but the bottom half would still
stays closed. Yeah, I know what he's talking about.
Is that a Dutch door? No, that's not a Dutch door.
Are you talking about she would always go out in the back because they never showed her in the backyard? That she had like a sort of a porch off of her kitchen. I don't know why the fuck I remember this shit.
Yeah, but this is the first season. The house was totally different.
Okay.
And she would open the top half of the back door. So the bottom half remains, latched. And she would just open the top half and she would like talk to her neighbors and stuff.
Oh, okay. I always call it a Captain Kangaroo door because I think
I can see why.
Yeah.
I never watched Captain Kangaroo, but yes. So anyway, it looked totally different at the very beginning, and I believe it was recorded live because I think it was broadcast on the airwaves live in the earliest days of the show. So that's why if you watch them, you'll see like they have little flubs and little SNL mistakes because they weren't doing any takes or anything like that.
I think that is absolutely fascinating, and it's really no wonder that they invested in this show, because they were probably very friendly with the guy who directed them in their first 38 episodes. And you know, I don't want to get on a bunny trail. We don't get on bunny trails on this podcast. They also did another really enterprising thing in TV histories. They created the 3-camera system, so you could say, like I learned in school many years ago, when I would cut, okay, camera 2, cut, camera 3, called it, cut camera to camera 3, you know, stuff like that, instead of just having like one camera, you know.
Or I think they probably had multicam, like classic Doctor Who, where they could switch on the fly as well.
Oh yeah, obviously, yeah.
Yeah. But also, some people have asked me over the years since my very first podcast, Mostly Harmless Cutaway, because to my knowledge, all episodes that have ever been produced by myself or Caleb, if you listen past the Easter egg, there's a little sting at the end, a little musical sting. And some people have asked me over the years, what is that? Where does it come from? And it's actually the little stinger theme for Desilu Productions. It's at the end of all the episodes of I Love Lucy, TOS, and many other programs from back in the day. It's just TOS was one of the first two like programs that weren't directly produced for children that I ever watched in prime time that I remember. And so I always remember the little stinger at the end of the credits, and that's why I chose it for all my podcasts. So now you know.
So I have a point to make just about the animation itself, and just how you guys feel, or anybody listening, of course, if with the animation itself. I am a big believer in animation, and also believe that for more, I won't say supernatural, but for a lot more like out there and surreal ideas and concepts. Obviously, you can get to like 2001 visuals, which are amazing still and hold up to this day. But like for the ones that are a lot more, higher, we'll see this with was it the Riders of Rohan or whatever it's called, not Riders of Rohan, whatever the new Lord of the Rings film, if they like utilize animation properly with these fantastical elements. Do you feel as though, in comparison to like a TAS episode, and we'll only use that just as an example, nothing like afterwards, just in the here and now of like this is 1970 or whatever, do you guys feel as though the animation elevates this, fantastic voyage plots of we're inside this cosmic being and we're determining whether or not it's alive or not, or is it just it's just a bunch of pictures. It's a bunch of like cool, colorful pictures that the artists and animators like got high off of mushrooms to like realize.
Yeah. You want to go or shall I? Who are we doing? Who's answering this?
You go ahead.
All right. Well, getting back to the initial theme of being able to do some things that Gene Roddenberry wanted to do with the original series, but he couldn't. Just start with the aliens. I think, yeah, you are making a good point that because it's animated, they can do things that they couldn't easily do on the TV show, or it would have cost them a whole lot. So right away, right, we've got crew members that are, half cat and whatever, rock folian thing. We see more aliens aboard the Enterprise. And the scope of what they're doing, the ship flying around inside of another one. Even though I was cracking about the 70s, animation style, the concept of being able to fly the Enterprise around inside of that being and slice a piece off of it and all of that, that's a breadth of effect that would have been real difficult for them to do on the show. So we are, again, benefiting from, the fact that we've got animation doing it, like you said, is a good point, and the stuff that Roddenberry wanted to do but couldn't afford to do on the show. So yeah, I think that the animation helps it with getting this idea across. So yeah, that's a good point.
I think I want to say it's a mixed blessing, but I don't want to even sound negative on this point at all. So I'll just call it a blessing. But on the one hand, what Carl says is very true, and especially the cast member or the crew member for the animated series, Arex, Arex. He is the three-armed helmsman there who replaced Chekhov, which I'll talk about more at the end of this episode. But anyway, so yes, you have these characters like Arex who would be very difficult to realize in live action. More to say about that later too. But anyway, but the reason I was thinking mixed blessing is because while everything Carl said is true, in some of the episodes that we watched already for RBG or that I've seen, because they have that liberty, some of the aliens are way over the top. Now, I'm not saying it's bad. It's just it's wild. And some of the environments and alien planets and alien home bases are just wild. And so honestly, that's more of a good thing than a bad thing. It's just I noticed they are super pushing out the envelope.
Well, remember, this is 1960s Fallout. So this is like what alien worlds would have been imagined during the 60s would look like, including the colors. So,
Right.
yes, they do get a little crazy. But again, it's what they would have tried to do with the show, but couldn't get away with.
What I thought was funny in this episode in regards to this is that, okay, so it's animated, you know, like you said, they could do whatever they want. And there were some minor alterations to the bridge that make it different from the standard TOS bridge. But I thought it was funny in this episode when they had the counter with the turning
Yeah.
numbers, because we all know that's how they would do countdown clocks, etc., like a old odometer on your car. We know that's how they would do it in live action, and it's so funny to me that they have animation now. They can make the screens and readouts look any way they want, but they're animating analog technology, and I just think, yeah, that gave me like a little weird chuckle.
Look, they're keeping it real. That's what it would have looked like on the set. So that they're keeping real.
That's funny. And I don't know if we're going to talk about more about the animation style, but when we originally said we were going to talk about this episode or a TAS episode, I would strongly encourage any of you here or anyone else listening who has not seen the very short treks that are officially available on the Paramount or Star Trek YouTube channel. I think there's only 5 or 6 of them in total, and each of them is only about 2.5, 3 minutes long. But they were produced, in 2023, and they are emulating this animation style, except you get to see a TNG micro adventure, and what were some of the other ones? Was there Enterprise or Voyager? Certainly there was a Discovery or Strange New Worlds episode. And they're very short, they're very funny, and they're done in this art style. And I think the more modern shows are amazing with this art style.
Well, it is certainly retro. When I watch it, it takes me back to this era. And once again, the vibe is still there. So it's fun to watch it.
In the audio of the very short treks, they even duplicate like the little like analog sound. What do you call it? Like the analog noise that you would hear, like almost sounds like when you change a track on a LP. They add that type of like kind of like what they did with Grindhouse for the cinema.
Yeah.
They do that for these very short treks, and it's perfect.
Nice. Yeah, the needle drop sound. Yeah, I got you. Cool.
Any other thoughts before we get to rating this sucker?
We may have talked about this 3 times longer than the actual episode.
Oh, way more than 3 times, because Inside Baseball, if this makes the cut, we had to restart multiple times, and I've played through the episode at least 5 or 6 times. But just a couple other notes, and you guys can formalize your final thoughts and unit of measures. But it's, I can't remember if we discussed this on RBG already, but it's very curious that they got all the original principal voice cast of the original crew back to do the animated series, except for one, which was Walter Koenig, aka Chekhov. And I did some deep Google dives previously, trying to get to the bottom of it, and there's no satisfactory answer. Some say they only had the budget to hire everyone else except for Walter Koenig. And then, of course, he's replaced by Eric's, who I think, this is from memory, may be voiced by James Doohan as well, because James Doohan was one of those types of voice actors, outside of Star Trek.
Yeah, lots of options.
Yeah, and then even Majel Barrett, who of course is the Nurse Chapel original, who is of course the computer in TNG, DS9, etc. She does a lot of the alternate voices in the animated series as well. For instance, when the Cloud speaks in this episode, that's Majel Barrett, of course, Roddenberry's wife.
Well, maybe Walter Koenig didn't need the money.
That's a joke. So,
do you know where that's from? Oh, okay.
No, I don't know where that's from. But I suspect there's something else that no one's talking about. I don't know what it is, but I suspect there's more. And Walter Koenig didn't really give much insight on this particular subject himself. There had to be something else going on, but I don't know. Who knows the answer to that?
Lots of hookers, lots of blow, maybe. Maybe. I'm not saying I heard that and it's true.
Well, I do know that they were having some rather significant budget issues.
That is true.
When they decided to make the series. I also know that they had planned, they had not initially planned to have George Takei and Nichelle Nichols be on the show, on the animated series. They were just going to swap them out for other folks. But Leonard Nimoy took a stand and insisted that they be a part of it. And he might have even taken a bit of a pay cut to ensure that they could participate in the animated series. I know initially they weren't supposed to be part of it, and he did something to ensure that they were a part of it. So I don't know if he couldn't extend the tent further enough to get Walter in there or what the deal was, but they weren't even going to have George in the shell. So I don't know what they were thinking or what their deal was, but there were some significant budget issues with the animated series, and maybe that was just the casualty.
It's okay. They brought him back for the motion picture, and then they burned his hand. Spoiler in the movie. But all right. I think I got most of what I wanted to get into on this one.
Oh, there's one other little minor detail. I don't know what the deal was with Koenig and why they did not include him, but is it true? I think he wrote one of the episodes.
Oh, yes. Yes, that's the one I think that we watched before on this podcast.
Yeah, Infinite Vulcan is the one that he wrote.
Yes, you are correct. You are correct. And I did some research back when me and Kayla did that about a year ago. And I guess that's when I was doing my deep dive. And there was some mention that they were throwing him a bone.
Right. Because, like I said, I don't know why Nimoy wasn't quite able to extend his influence enough to get him in there. But finally they tried to get the posse together and at least send him a couple of dollars to do that. So they were trying.
It's a decent episode. It's not bad.
Yeah.
Dumb observation. This is the earliest sign we're gonna get of needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few.
Oh, did they mention that?
Well, it's just when this is like obviously retroactive. I was noticed that when they were talking about um, when Kirk was brought up the moral choice of the whole
Oh
moral
yeah,
quandary of there's what was it 80 million people.
80 trillion. I think maybe
I
Bones
thought it was a
said.
million, but 80, let's just say 80 million. 80 million people on the planet. And then there's this one cosmic being. So, in a way, now I assume TAS had those numbers or had that unspoken quote as
Mm-hmm.
well in
Mm-hmm.
previous episodes. So this is nothing new. I'm just being a dirtbag and being like, hey, isn't this that quote?
Yeah.
I thought of it too. Yeah.
Some lingering chads before you guys surprise me with the unit measure. I liked how approximately middle of the episode when they realize they seem to be in something that resembles an organic body, that initially their course of action is to basically head for the anus. That's they don't say anus in the episode, but they basically describe it as such. Um, I love the part when Spock does the mind meld with the creature, and it's like, "Who is this?" And it's like, "My name is Spock. I am inside you." And he says it like a couple other ways. I'm on this vessel, and there are other beings here, and we are all inside you now. It's like,
It was the '70s, baby.
I love it. I love it. And then last but not least, when Spock is showing the cloud like some footage of Earth, or what it's like, I thought, oh, this has to be from some animated series. There's no way they just animated these little scenes for these little interstitials. And yes, there was a lot of scenes taken from Lassie's Rescue Rangers, 1973. So that's where a lot of those little images of the boy and girl
Far out. Let's go, bud.
that came from. So I didn't know there was another series called Rescue Rangers. Interesting, but
That's
yeah.
funny.
Predating the Rescuers, nice.
Unit of measure? Anyone?
Antimatter Cili.
Sure.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Okay. I'll go ahead and go first. And another thing I wanted to mention, the upgrade to the engine room. Wow.
Yeah, that was pretty.
They really did a refit there. And
Out of sight, man.
I don't know if it's the first time or if they did in TOS, but we get to look inside the nacelles, which is something I was super excited about the first time we got to see that on Next Generation, because I always love seeing new sections of the ship.
Well, see, there you go. We couldn't have pulled that off with the old TV budget.
Hell no, hell no.
So, animation to the rescue.
Yeah, I always wondered, could you go in them? Like, what's in there? Do they store food? I don't know.
Mhm.
Anyway, initially I was going to give this episode 2.5. What are they called again?
Cili.
July. I was going to give 2.5 out of 5. But because of what Carl said earlier about Gene Roddenberry trying to, like, you know, work on his ideas over time with more budget, etc. Honestly, that actually meant something to me, and I'll think about that going forward with Star Trek in general. And so I'm going to bump it up to a 3 because of Carl.
Nice. Nice.
Sean.
I'm going to just give it a 2.5. No, I'm going to go down. I'm going to give it a 2 because I have absolutely no compunction to watch this again. There's stuff that you watch when it's like hokey and it's like cool. I'll watch that, and I'll laugh at it or whatever. This treaded that fine line between, hey, there's a good story here versus some really hokey animation. And I'm really sorry, everybody. I have to apologize. This includes the anime fans. I just can't appreciate the animation. Okay. And I've really tried to, at least enjoy anime stuff. because especially with movies like Spirited Away and My Neighbor Totoro, like, there's probably some good shit in there. I've never, I can't, and
And I just want to be clear about this. You mean animation in general, not just specific to this episode, right?
no, yeah, you're correct. Anime, Japanese anime.
Oh, well, okay, I did. Yeah, all right, gotcha.
Ike.
So I'll take Sean's score. I'm gonna double it because
Whoa.
what can I say? Yeah, there's because of the limitations and them just having a TAS episode does not equal better. Don't worry. I just like the utilitarian nature of this, and it is almost like a poppy comic book from like a pulp comic from like the 30s or 40s brought to television, mixed with like 70s trippiness. So
You know what? I totally get that, Ike, because I really like watching Tales from the Crypt, which is
Yep.
exactly what that fucking is.
Yep.
And I can eat that up, but I think it's just a matter of preference of horror versus sci-fi
Oh, of course.
for me. Yeah.
Nice.
Wait, is there an animated Tales from the Crypt
Yes.
oh, okay.
I've never watched it. Don't ask. I don't know.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna go with 3.5 antimatter cilii. Again, while I do like animation, 1970s animation is not my favorite. That is the only limitation, though. If I look through the animation, what they were doing in this episode is, really does harken back to original series ideas, and it brought me back. It brought me back to the original series. It was fun to watch.
Cool. Stay tuned next time. I don't know if we'll be jumping into DS9, TOS, because we already have some on the docket when we can reconvene. So I don't know where we're jumping to next, but stay tuned for that. And closing out the show today, this is Eric.
This is Carl.
This is Sean.
This is Red Shirt Ike.
And until next time,
May the wind be at our backs.
Beware Romulans bearing gifts.
who would like to say for the very first time, may the wind be at our backs?
Take it, Ike.
May the wind be at our backs.
Hooked on phonics work for me. Sorry, I don't mean to make a demeaning joke. All right.
And I'm not a big fan of anime in general. I'm tired of Disney. I'm tired of them making movies over and over again, the same movies, but they had some good animation back then, and they're doing good stuff now. But sorry, everybody.
No, you're fine.
I lost track.
I want to say some of these are really good, these animated series. I've only seen a few in total, but some of them are pretty darn good for what they are. And one of these days, Sean, I'm going to try to make you and or Tom sit down and watch an anime movie called Your Name or something else.
Your
like
name's Eric.
that. Right. Because a movie like Your Name,
Eric.
and there's other recent ones,
Your name's Eric. It's called Your Name's Eric. He's not saying.
They really
saying
take
your
the
name.
art form to another level, like of animated picture in general.
Okay. All right. Oh, Jesus. I shouldn't even mention this. Well, they did have some things on Shudder that popped up. some dark things like with vampires and shit, and they're kind of sexy and it's kind of cool.
Well, there's a lot of that. If that's your
And I
kink.
get the same vibe from Castlevania.
Oh, that's a good one.
I started exploring that because they have a Castlevania chapter in Dead by Daylight.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you can play Dracula, you can play Belmont, you can play Alucard.
Is that going on right now?
Yeah.
We need to get on there. I want to see
Girl,
this.
girl, that was like 2 chapters ago, all right?
Why didn't you tell me? I want to see that now.
I haven't played it in a while. But yeah. It kind of reminds me of that because I turned on Castlevania when that thing came out for the video game, and I watched maybe 10 minutes of it, and I'm like, this is just too dramatic. It's like a novella, a TV novella, but it's like set in hell or something, you know? It's just wow, over dramatic.
That show is absolutely brilliant, and you would love it.
I remember.
Don't know about season 2.
If it was a novel, you'd eat it up.
Mm-hmm.
It's like Anne Rice meets Game of Thrones or something with more action.
Mm-hmm. It's good stuff.